Dr. Gloria.
And welcome to the December 2012 Suffolk County Council on Environmental Quality meeting. I just want to remind everybody this is a public meeting. I don't know if you're an employee. I know the other woman is. I recognize her.
Janet.
I remember Janet on the left. Okay, so I don't really have to announce that it's a public meeting, and you're welcome to speak at your time when we come up to the issue that you're concerned about. But otherwise, we will begin. Has anybody had a chance to review the August and the October 2012 minutes, the meeting minutes?
I tried. I got locked out.
You got locked out?
I couldn't get it.
From your home computer?
No problems.
Okay. Anybody else have a chance? No? All right. Hopefully next month we'll have somebody who will have a little free time.
Was I here in August?
I didn't do it.
That's okay.
I think I was.
I just won't flog you tonight. I'll flog you next month.
Okay, all right, you got it.
No. So somebody, can hopefully look at those, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Correspondence? Mike,
we did
saw
get
some things.
one letter from the health department regarding the Rollstone Estates acquisition, but we can touch on that when it comes to us on the agenda.
Yeah, I'm seeing the second letter about the bill not being done yet.
That was an earlier letter.
Okay.
I just wanted you guys to have that as backup.
Okay,
but this one dated the 4th supersedes that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Historic Trust Doctor.
Here we go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, just some updates on our housing and contracts, and then I'll be going into a background history of the Prosser Pines site. The housing, all our homes that can be rented are filled. The storm did affect one, but it's not on the historic list. Our Cedar Point home out in Southold, that was right near a canal and did get flooded, and we're still deciding what to do with that, but that was a 1960s small ranch that was not on the historic list. And that's the major damage to the housing program from the storm. The contracts, it's basically the status quo of what I reported in the past. There's a lot of contracts in play at different points. Things are moving forward. We're working on the Oldfield Farm in the office at this point. We're also working on the Timber Point and West Sayville Lessings contracts for the catering, working on the Bayport Heritage contract, which is at the county attorney's office, working on the Sagnicos Manor amendment to their contract to extend it, which is also that's at their office for review, the Sagnicos Manor Historic Society office. The Deep Wells contract is being extended. That's now at the county attorney's office, and the Long Island Maritime Museum contract is still being negotiated.
So, is the Maritime Museum and the Roosevelt Estate did not get flooded?
The Maritime Museum probably got the most water, but it actually did not come into the main museum building or the small craft building. It was very interesting. They just slightly raised up, so you had a water line right in front of them. The buildings that did get water is the Oyster House and the Penny Boat Shop. But those are exhibit buildings, and it just did come up above the floor level. We just need to clean those out, but not much damage.
You're kidding me. I thought that they were very, very low lying, and
they are. But you could see they're just slightly raised up. You could see the debris.
What was the
high
storm surge
tide
in the area? Do you know?
Excuse me?
What was the storm surge in the area?
Do you know that?
No, I don't.
No.
But it's at the administration building as well. It came within a couple of feet. It just...
Well, to put it bluntly, I'm shocked. Happily, but...
Yeah. Well, that's what shows you. The garage was built by the Hart family that raised up a little bit. The small craft museum, hopefully someone thought about when they placed it there. It is raised up a bit higher than the rest of the surrounding ground.
And what about the Roosevelt Estate?
Roosevelt, the water did go up, of course, always covers the entrance road, but that didn't go up to the house. And again, if you look at that house, they did situate it just to the east on the property, and it's at a slight rise. And also, the caretaker told me that in the 1938 hurricane, it also did not flood.
Did it go over the dam over there? Any chance back up at all?
The dam.
If I remember correctly, there's a dam over at Montauk at the end of the lake over there.
Oh, yes, I know what you mean. No, it couldn't possibly have. If it didn't go above into the house, it didn't go above.
Well, it went above Montauk Highway, Middle Road.
Yeah, but not
on two sides. Not the bridge itself, which was just reviewed here. Actually, that didn't get covered, but there were two like streams at the low points on either side of the bridge.
That's another 5 feet up the dam Montauk Highway.
Yeah, because I know a couple of dams actually got backwashed, believe it or not. For example, in Smithtown. So,
right.
Just curious.
Yeah, there wasn't any damage. So, we did have an odd occurrence at the main house, though, at Meadowcroft, from the storm. A huge piece of slate literally flew off. It was a cap on one of the large chimneys, and it flew off and hit the flat roof, and like just the corner of it, like a projectile, went through the roof. And that we had a flood through the house from that. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from because it was hidden by the snow. We had the snow right after, so the slate was hidden by the snow. So that was a surprise, but that was quickly fixed.
But they did very well actually, as far as
yes.
lack of flooding. That's good.
Yes. Okay, so now I'd like to start the discussion on Prosser Pines, give you some background to it, and just to start, like why we're even reviewing this. This property was dedicated back in 1984. I did include the resolution in the packet, and it did dedicate all the property at that point, but we've had issues with the buildings on site in the sense of their condition. And when we took a serious look at the resolution, we realized the buildings were not listed here or identified at all. And actually, there's a few of them that were done at this 1984 time period, and there might be some others that only give property boundaries including the whole park, but do not list the buildings or the features that should be protected within that park. So we thought at this point we should go back and take a serious look at the structures on the site, their condition, and decide how to move forward with the existing conditions. And Mike recommended that instead of just amending this resolution, the existing, we redo it with a new one that was more complete and was very clear as to the historic features that should be protected. So that's why we're here today. We did have 2 meetings on site with the Historic Trust Committee. If you just flip through your packet, you'll see an aerial shot here. And we are including the whole park again. We did not change that boundary. What you'll notice at the bottom here is a out parcel, like a rectangular piece. There's 2 actually, but the one further in, that is actually county property. That was purchased after the first original purchase. So you'll also see that identified on this site map. I think it's next in the packet, or near if you take. Yes. This will be very helpful to review everything here, because all the buildings are situated in one area. So that was where Edith Prosser lived when the county purchased the property. When she passed away, that was added to the park.
So both of those parcels are going to be included in the dedication?
Yes, and they were in the original, and they're included again.
Both, or just the one to the right? This one also?
Not the one, as you're looking at the map, the one to the left, no, is not included.
Just the one to the right.
Right, that's still private property.
Okay.
So that, I don't know why this map's not updated, but anyway, the property boundaries are not changing. They're the same as they were dedicated in 1984. We're just adding a detailed list of the historic buildings and features. And this will, as we go the review on it, we're looking to do 2 resolutions. One to dedicate buildings or features, and one to list some buildings. Okay, so we're actually going to be doing 2 resolutions. And the historic background to this park, it's a very early farmstead on Long Island. The people know it, of course, for the pine trees that are there. but it predates that era when the Dayton family planted the pine trees. When they bought the property in 1793, the house that's actually in terrible shape now was existing, and the barn was there. And that was built by William Brewster. So I don't have an exact date, but we've given a circa 1790 date on those properties. And when the Daytons bought the property in 1793, they worked it as a farm, early farm on Long Island. And then they held the property up until 1889, I'm sorry. And then the property was sold out to George Prosser, and his name is what's attached to the park now. And he owned the property, or the family owned the property, until the purchase in 1969. The pine trees, the story is that the son of the original owner, William Dayton, planted them in 1812. So this was a long-established pine grove on Long Island. It was well recognized in the 20th century as a unique landscape and site. And in 1944, Dr. Robert Cushman Murphy did a survey of the property and was already promoting it for public purchase. So very early on, this was recognized. They didn't want to see it developed. And there was probably a lot of concern because in 1944, George Prosser passed away. So his wife remained on site, but it took actually 25 years until 1969 for the county purchase, which did protect the site. And that was the main impetus for the movement to preserve it, was to protect the pine trees that were there.
An invasive species?
No, eastern white pines are not invasive.
I'll leave that to Nick.
They think they're indigenous to Long Island.
Yeah. Not common, but
Not
Not
common.
common.
We're a climatic medium over here.
Okay.
So that was always
Southern range.
recognized from the 19th century to the 20th century, what a unique pine grove we had here. But it was, the initial grove was planted by the farmers, and then it expanded naturally on its own over time. So that all of that pine grove is included in the dedication. The buildings are really, we're looking at three phases of the development of the property. The original farmstead, which was actually the Brewster farmstead from the 1700s, the barn complex and outbuildings that remain from George Prosser's time, and then the later homes that were built again by the Prosser family in the 20th century. So and there's various conditions. We'll go through the pictures here at each site to the structures right now. We took 2 site visits there. Lori Billadello, who's our archaeologist on the committee, was concerned that we protect the foundations and the area around them as an archaeological site. So you'll see quite a few of the buildings now are not being saved for the structure, but for the archaeological site and the foundation. And so I guess at that point we'll just start going through individual buildings.
Rich,
Do you have any questions?
Just looking through this quickly. Basically, if it's the last time we were there as a group, we had a meeting, and I remember taking a tour of the area, and a number of the buildings were basically in the shape that we see over here. As a general rule, what you're saying is you don't want to rebuild. You're just going to classify them as archaeological and sort of let them collapse down.
Well, they have collapsed.
Well, beyond what we see over here.
So, yeah. Yes is the answer. The committee thought at this point, like, we can't even access these buildings. I do not have architectural plans for these buildings to reconstruct them. We'll photograph them. I have some photographs. But just, again, a little more background. When the county, the Historic Trust was established and with staff in 1980, these buildings were slated to come down at that time. So essentially what the Prossers did was, instead of maintaining the house, they built new. And we see this also in Yaphank. The caretakers, they built a new house and abandoned the historic structure. And that's what happened here. So in 1980, they were slated to be torn down. Lance Malamo decided not to do that when he started working, and they just boarded them up. But there was no funding provided, and we've basically
collapsed
lost the
then.
structures.
Yeah.
Right. So when the county, I'm sure when the county purchased the property in 1969, they were not habitable at that point either. So it's, we could have early on turned it around,
So
but
basically
at this
what's
point-
savable is what you're going to try and dedicate. What's not savable,
Yes.
given the pictures, is just archaeological.
Yes, and that's what the committee recommends.
What do you mean by savable?
The dedicated buildings, like, we don't want to dedicate something unless we think we can maintain it.
Remember, it's the money issue.
And they're, the Prosser barn, the large barn on site, which is circa 1900, we put a new roof on that building, and that's structurally sound, so that we've been able to save with the funds that we did get. And the houses are in good shape, the 20th century homes, and they're in our housing program, the two of them.
Where's the money going to come from to do this? Your
For the
salary?
clearing or for the restoration?
Restoration.
What we have to do there can probably come from our operating budget. We're going forward on the Prosser barn. There's a shed roof addition to the building that's getting reconstructed right now, literally. So those smaller projects I can fund from the operating budget.
Yeah, on these things, Richard, the ones where you're dedicating the foundation,
Yes.
I'd like it to read dedication of the foundation only, and the second thing in the Dayton house, dedication of the foundation / footprint only.
Okay.
I
Can
want
we-
that clear on all of them.
Yes, and then, but should we run through each individual one, and then you could make your
That's fine with me. Huh?
requests
That's fine.
for each one? Okay. So the Dayton barn picture, okay, number 1. And so that's the early, probably 1790 or earlier barn that is completely caved in on itself. And so we are just dedicating the foundation. So, Jim, do you want to just repeat what wording you'd
Just
like
say
to say?
dedicate the foundation only. I want that clear, that we're only dedicating the foundation.
Yes.
That allows for cleanup, is what you're driving at, Jim?
Well, yeah, it allows the Parks Department to go in there and get rid of, the structures. I assume right now they're attractive nuisance.
Yes, well, you can see
And
the
we probably
snow
have a
fence around here.
liability.
We don't have a lot of traffic in this area of the park. People do come in and go through the Pine Grove. But we would, with this review, plan to remove this debris, is the plan.
Before you just remove it, there may be interesting archaeological pieces, such as how things are joined together, and
The
old
loss.
nails and
The loss of the Dayton barn is a real loss because the framing, the first time that we visited, the framing was still intact. And I don't know.
We have discussed trying to salvage some
Some of the
framing. We do
framing,
have the
yeah.
large Prosser barn that we could store items like that on site.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have discussed that. So if there are some framing elements that are decent that we could save, we plan to do
Yeah,
that.
just put them in a collection someplace, photograph them, make sure we at least have a little bit of a record.
Yes. Yes, that is the plan. And we do have storage right on site that I can do that. Okay. The next is number 2, the Dayton house. Now this, on the front, looks like it's standing, but if you go around the back, the back wall is totally caved in. You cannot access this building at all now. In the front picture on the left, you see like a dark area of the roof. That's a large dormer that just fell in on itself. And that's actually when it came to the attention of the area residents. We still fooled people up until a few years ago that this house was occupied because of the fake windows painted in on the plywood. But once the dormer literally caved in into the building, it became quite apparent that it was just a facade. And it is a shame that we're losing this. Like I said, it's an early 1700s home on the left, and then there were additions made to it over time, including the early 20th century. But it would be a total reconstruction at this point. And also this site's another good example of a site where I don't have any community group attached to it. So I had no one campaigning locally to restore this site. And they just can't sit there for 30, 40 years without attention. So it's also planned for the house to dedicate the foundation, and we can add foundation only.
Yeah, I just say dedicate the same as the first one, the foundation / footprint only.
Right.
So that there's no misunderstanding later on.
Yes.
So we can take the be preserved out and just say dedicate the foundation / footprint only?
Yes. And then to be consistent, the first one says archaeological, the second one should be the same thing. So
Yeah, it says archaeological site. The first one just says archaeological.
if you want to say archaeological site on the first one, that's fine.
We should be consistent.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. The third building is the Prosser Barn. This, built after George Prosser bought the property in 1889. We figure it's about 1900. And the structure is good. The roof is new. And the shed addition that you see in the top photo, that's being rebuilt now. We do use that for storage of wood that we had milled in our sawmill at one point. And we have additional items in the barn, so this we definitely plan to maintain and keep. And that is why it's being dedicated for architectural and the context and setting within the farmstead. Any questions on that one? Okay, the next is shed number 3. This building stands directly behind the Prosser Barn. It looks kind of funky in the photos. The committee, again, took a close look at it. They thought the frame was still intact. And this was an interesting outbuilding in the farmstead, and they decided to dedicate it. And that roof, believe it or not, is still keeping the water off of the framing. This building would obviously need a new roof and the siding, but they did decide to dedicate it.
Rich, do you know what that building was used for? I'm looking at the bottom picture.
Some sort of machine shop.
Yeah,
It's some sort of machine shop, but yeah, we couldn't figure out
We
exactly.
spent a long time trying to figure out what. If anyone here can help.
Because also in reading about George Prosser's time, where I think this would date to, he leased the buildings and the property out to different local farmers over time. So you could have all different activities going on here. But it was, when you see the early photos, this land was all cleared around these buildings, and it was, an operating farm. But we could not figure out the function exactly. And that's part of.
I think that's part of the reason we dedicated it, because, we thought maybe it'll come to light what that is. It's.
They were intrigued.
Yeah, we were really intrigued.
It is unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I would have to get funding then to work on that. That's probably, after this decisions here, the building that would need the most attention.
What's the type of wood that was used in this?
This is just like this clapboard siding. You mean the framing or the?
No, the framing and the siding.
The framing there is quite. It seemed you can't. It's not a good look here, but it seemed early, and it could be oak. The siding is probably pine.
And is that concrete
Yes.
there? So
Yeah.
when was that dated to?
20th century.
Yeah, so...
That's why we're puzzled.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a concrete floor. They could have had, I read one comment that there was a generator in the building, so it could be, to power the equipment, what was there,
I'm sorry. Do you
Okay.
mind if you just give me just a tiny bit because I missed, because I was late, and again, I'm sorry.
what we're doing
The
here.
significance of this farm and these.
Just as an
buildings?
early farmstead, there's 3 eras we're looking at here of ownership going back to the 1700s. It was an early Long Island farmstead, and then used up and through the early 20th century. So this structure seems like probably an early 20th century or late 19th century structure. And there are a lot of odd and interesting buildings on the site. We couldn't figure out the use for all of them. You'd need someone maybe from Halleckville or some farm museum to come on site and maybe could figure it out for us.
But the reason we're doing this, initially, the entire property was dedicated.
It has been dedicated already.
All right, but the buildings were not mentioned. Just the whole property was dedicated, and so we went back to look at the structures since that's what we should be doing and clarify. That's right. We're trying to clarify it.
It just scares me to add something of such disrepair without really knowing what its significance
And
was.
that's-
It's kind of like,
Well, there's significance to it historically.
Well, that was
do you have a rating?
no,
That's a
but
good question. Like, is there like a rating system for historic?
It's not really a rating. I think it's just when we dedicate something, the point is you want to keep that forever. That's how I look at it. That's what you're doing.
Right.
And then our second category is the listing. We're just saying it is of historic significance, but it gives you different choices over time what to do with the building.
It's not as restrictive.
It's not as restrictive.
I mean, this is a
So it's-
clarification because
Yeah.
it
No,
says
I
once
get
it's
it.
dedicated, you can't remove it unless you go to referendum by the county. So the original structures on the list here, which is the Dayton barn and the Dayton house, they only want to, because they're so far gone, they only want to dedicate the foundations as archaeological and allow the parks to take the structures out. And some of these other are still standing. That some of the
It's
stuff
what's
could be
savable. They're going to try to
Here's-
save what they can.
so.
Go on.
My understanding of the reason we're going through this exercise is that if the interpretation of dedicating the entire thing, which is what has been done,
Right.
would mean that all of these structures were dedicated. It's clear all of these structures don't deserve dedication. And so we've just taken the first 2 that are collapsed, the house and the barn, which were the most significant, but we're but they fell down. So we are not dedicating those. So this is essentially a housekeeping exercise.
And then is there something around this to protect people from wandering in?
Well, there is something around the house. It isn't as sturdy as it needs to be. It's not as sturdy as it needs to be because you could, if you go through the fence on the Dayton house, you'll walk, fall into the cellar.
Right.
Yeah, you'll see the security there is uneven.
Yeah.
We put like chain link around some, snow fence around the others.
By doing this, are we going to get parks to secure these?
Yes.
And hopefully dismantle.
The point of this review is decide what we want to keep, and then to direct parks to please move forward to clean up the site.
And then you've thought long and hard about the decision to save what isn't really as historically valuable instead of like redoing what was more.
Well, it's more of a common sense approach.
Yes,
That, like
yes.
Marianne just said, the house and the barn, when you're looking at the history of the site, was a very early farmstead on Long Island from the 1700s. So normally that's what you restore,
Right.
but it's too far gone. It would be a total reconstruction at this point, and that's not really the purpose of our program.
Right.
It's really a
And
restoration program.
As Richard pointed out, we don't even have, for the house,
That's what you said.
we don't have the architectural history. So to try to restore the Dayton house would be a guessing game. And the barn, as some of you know, I love barns, and I I think that was a sad loss, but I would have a hard time arguing that the Dayton barn we should put that money into that. So.
And a little more. I'm sorry.
Going back to your budget issue, though.
Yes.
You say you're going to do it out of your existing budget, but what won't get done for what that we already have? Because I doubt if your budget's going to be increased.
It's not in the near future.
Did you do a report that showed we need like 58 million to...
Well, what we need is the hotel motel tax to fund the restoration program as it was originally planned. That's what we need.
That's what we need. Yeah,
And
for
then
that to go back the way.
Then we'd be fine.
Then we'd be fine.
That's what's needed.
That's the state changed that, right?
No,
No,
the ledge changed that.
Leaving it.
Yeah.
We can talk about that sometime.
That's
You can just change it back.
yeah.
Remember, right now well,
The-
what's the
the
ledge?
intent
Ledge
was-
authorized it, but Levy's the one who started it.
Right. Then we'd be fine. But like I said, this kind of stopped at looking at the condition of this building. I would have enough to fix this, but yes, it would drain funds from other sites. The operating fund that I have is used for roof repairs and maintenance of the buildings, and it does get used up quickly.
Here's my argument, Larry. If you look at shed number 3, right now the timber, the framing, is intact. And in order to save something like this, if you can keep a roof on it and keep the frame intact, then it will wait until they change the hotel motel tax and you have the funds. And this is the roof right now is okay, and it wouldn't take much to extend what you see that, right? So putting this in a position where it could stand without falling down like the first two wouldn't cost a lot of money. And I think that's why we're arguing to go ahead and dedicate it.
Are these photos pre or post hurricane?
Pre.
Has anybody been there since?
No.
But I'll tell you how impressive this is. The committee went twice. Michael? The committee went twice, and each time the committee reviewed the site, the Dayton barn was still standing.
Well, hang in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mary Ann, though, in your committee,
Yes.
you didn't even have a quorum.
Yeah, we didn't have a quorum, but if you put... The second meeting was to pull in people who hadn't been there for the first meeting, and we had discussed it the first time around. And I don't think that there was anyone that disagreed with.
No.
And that's why we had the second meeting. We wanted everyone on the committee to see it.
Yeah, 'cause some people hadn't.
Some people hadn't seen it, and so you basically have a unanimous, even though it doesn't show in the vote. We didn't take the vote until everyone had seen it.
Marianne?
Yes.
A number of the CEQ members, though, had seen this, and we had agreed a couple of years ago that we didn't have the money to update and keep a lot of these properties, and we knew some of this stuff was going to go.
When did you see it? It was before I was on the CEQ.
I went through a tour over there. I don't remember with who, but a bunch of people.
Did he come to one of our meetings?
Maybe.
No, I may have been at the Historic Trust. I don't remember.
You must have come to the trust. The CEQ's never met there.
Yeah, none of they have. Just for
I've been on it?
BVL.
Oh, under BVL. Okay.
I mean, this property goes way back.
Yes, it does. It was BVL who dedicated it.
She was the one, exactly. She was the one.
I mean, if you want a little history,
Yeah.
we did a picture survey of all the historic structures in the 1970s,
Yeah.
and they weren't being taken care of. And the recommendation from CEQ went to Klein, if you don't start to restore some of these buildings and get them back in the program, we're going to recommend that the county can't take care of them and you give them to the local historic societies for preservation. And then all of a sudden, they came up with some type of program, and Richard was hired, or Lance was hired, and some other people. I mean, but to some extent, the county's still in that situation. There's no money for restoration, and these buildings are still becoming,
This would have
secure.
needed a major capital fund in the beginning.
I just wanted to make a point of reference to Larry that for the Historic Trust Committee, the quorum is at least 3 persons entitled to a vote provided at least one as a C&Q member. So having Mary Ann there and the two other votes, it was a quorum.
So you can have a quorum with less than 50% of the...
According to the bylaws, each committee may set its own
Yeah, but
quorum.
That's CEQ is a county chartered thing. The historic trust is an adjunct to it. And has a separate
But
bylaw.
Larry, I share your concern, which is why we met again. And why we saw to it that everyone from the committee had seen it.
You know, Mary Ann?
Yes.
Because I really think maybe the CEQ ought to visit it because of the potential cost. Or a subset of the CEQ.
Cost?
To keep it up?
To keep it up. I mean, we're essentially asking to loot the sort of a steady state fund to take on an additional burden. And as impressive as this is, it just seems to me like it's maybe not the best choice. That's just a personal opinion.
Well, the only building that really needs a lot of attention right now is this shed.
Okay.
Everything else that we're dedicating does not need funding right now. Because the majority of this is just dedicating the foundation. And at this point, the house and the barn is a hazard. This whole review really was initiated from the locals
I understand.
complaining.
You got to get rid of that.
Right.
Right.
And I don't feel comfortable until I have some direction from the Historic Trust that you're okay with me doing that.
Okay, but we have been telling the legislature that we don't think they should invest in buying new properties and so forth. And then we're going to invest in something that is sort of marginal. And
All right, so from my stand, this is my own personal opinion. All we're doing on this site is putting a roof on shed number 3.
Okay.
And putting a roof on the
Which is already...
the shed addition
Which is already
to the
going
Prosser
forward.
barn.
That's already
All right?
in place.
Those are the only two things, and everything else, we've gotten our archaeologists out there and we've looked at it, and there's some foundations that are very interesting on this site. And so we would like them dedicated. But the amount of money that we're putting into the barn and the shed is minimal. And the barn provides a place to put any of the timbers from the house and the earlier barn that are worth saving. In terms of our historic sites, I think we're asking, the money that would have to go into this would be for the cleanup.
And that's from a separate, the cleanup costs do not come out of my historic restoration fund.
Okay.
That comes from a separate budget.
I've got to agree with Mary Ann in one respect. Well, in many respects. But, yeah, this group has had a policy of sometimes saying that some of the purchases that might be coming down the pike might not be the best ones out there in our judgment. I show you property in Smithtown, for example, Commandinger, which I still don't see the historic value of, but it got put in. But the difference right now is the county owns this property right now. So we don't have the acquisition cost. Second off, it's the fact that this is one of the more historic properties we do have. Benign neglect, unfortunately, has knocked down a lot of the stuff. There is a fair amount, though, that is important. I've been to the site. I know BVL has been to the site. Marianne and her group have been to the site. I'm very convinced of the importance of this. I don't think that they're asking for that much to do it, as Rich is saying. I don't think the financials, since we own the site, and given what the distinctions that Rich is making, I don't think the financials should outweigh, if you look at it in terms of a balancing, what we can save. I mean, this is one of the more important properties in my eyes. I mean, for example, I look at the little red schoolhouse in Elwood. I think it was built in 1912 or something.
Yeah.
That one, that one's an unquestionable one. This one is much more, again, important in terms of the context and the setting. And what they're asking for is not enough, in my opinion, to break the system. And also, I'm not sure that the financials are something within our purview, given the fact that we own it already. And given the fact that Rich is saying he might be able to manage something and they're not asking that much. In that sense, I would agree with Marianne and a lot of the recommendations. And frankly, they are making some choices to look at some of these buildings that have already been essentially destroyed to one sense or another and just taking them down. I don't
And Larry,
think it's a bad
just to be
idea.
very clear, there is no plan and no recommendation to rebuild these buildings.
Right.
Okay, so that's where the major cost would come in, and that's not being recommended.
Jim?
I mean, this site has already been dedicated, and it was dedicated, the entire site, and all the buildings were dedicated, all right? And the Historic Trust reads that you cannot remove anything from Historic Trust unless you go to referendum. So the whole intent of this is to add clarification to that original dedication, so the Parks Department can then go in there and remove the dilapidated structures and everything else and possibly stabilize some of these other things. They are dedicated. And the county has
That
a
is the problem.
responsibility.
Yeah, that's their problem.
They would have
And
been
that's been the problem
cleared
all
earlier.
along.
Yeah.
They would have been cleared earlier if if the property wasn't dedicated.
That really is the problem. And Larry, I think it's a tough nut, because we're basically acknowledging the neglect without holding anyone accountable and allowing for safety for these historic structures to be removed.
Well, going back to the cover letter,
Yeah.
what Jim just said. However, the buildings and structures within the park were not included in the dedicating resolution.
They weren't named.
Explicitly.
In other words, the entire thing was dedicated.
Within the
I'm not a lawyer, but I think one could reasonably argue if you've dedicated the entire parcel, then everything that stands on it is
And
dedicated.
that's been our interpretation.
And that's been our interpretation.
I have to agree. The reading the reso and the way it's written, it's very, very clear. Everything's on there. But again, they're doing housekeeping to essentially allow the demolition of what's not over there anymore.
I mean, if the CEQ is very serious, and we are the Historic Trust to some extent, I mean, from what I understand, the hotel motel tax was originally designed in order to provide funds for restorations and everything else. And when the county started having financial problems, they gutted out everything, and they started hiring people with that money.
But they're using it for a lot of other things.
And for a lot of other things besides restoration.
Yep.
I mean, so maybe the council should look at what the status of that is and make a recommendation to the legislation that the original intent be restored, the monies be given back to parks in order to...
But the
We've
state-
done that.
but
We
the
could
state
do it again.
changed it.
No.
Yes, because Engelbright wrote the legislation that gave hotel motel tax money to the Vanderbilts, to the Walt Whitman
No,
site.
but
No.
just, you know,
and to-
Legislator Engelbright's very upset of the current
Right.
situation.
And
No, I know, but
Okay.
he did put in the Walt Whitman, but he put it in to the county legislature. It was the county that made the changes, that added the Vanderbilt, that put in Steve's Walt Whitman, but it was the county that made the changes.
the county may have requested it, but it was the state legislation now that we have to stick to.
No.
I'm
No,
almost certain, but we can
no,
ask an attorney.
no, it's
Okay.
all county, and Steve is upset.
So
It was.
you think that the county can just change it on
Oh,
without any
absolutely,
state action?
absolutely, and it was supposed to supplement preservation. And now, what the county has done is they have supplanted. They don't provide money.
Yeah, I have less funding than I have for like 10 years. With the increase to the 3%, I have less restoration
They've
funds.
thrown.
And that was not the intent.
That's right. They've thrown his offices and staff salaries and some other staff salaries that have nothing to do with preservation
When you say
into hotel
they-
motel. I mean the county legislature.
I know,
Well,
but when?
Exec too.
What?
When did it
When?
happen?
Was it 2 years ago or
It was
3?
Levy's last
2 or
time.
3 years ago.
Levy's last stand. They did it with the 477 money also.
It was 2 or 3 years ago. All right.
Yeah.
So, and I went and talked to Steve Engelbright. I said, here, this was supposed to supplement, and now they've supplied. And he said, yeah. And in fact, I think it's illegal what has been done.
We have to look because I'm pretty sure the state acted. And I'm pretty sure the state acted, so I'll look.
Well, check
I'll follow
into it,
up on
please,
and
please.
I'll get back to you. 'Cause
Yeah.
I could be wrong again. I wasn't
Okay.
a legislator, but then.
Yeah.
But my point is we're looking at these buildings and saying we want to re-clarify the dedication so the parks go in there and do something. Everybody's saying, well, we don't want to spend the money here, and yet, you know,
No.
the county in the past is now earmarking these funds for other uses besides dedication. You may
Negotiating a bill because they have to pay.
better, you know, earmark some of your effort to get more funding into
Well-
the restoration program.
But Richard isn't bringing this up
Steve, I can go
today because of the funding. We're just
No.
trying to clean it up.
Right.
That was my point was
Yeah.
that we're arguing over little things about do we want to spend our money here when the question here is the money's been disappearing.
And
Period.
it's already dedicated, and this is just
Yes.
cleaning up and
We're trying to
clarifying
clean
the
it up.
purpose.
I yield. I give up.
About damn time.
Where were we? We're on the shed.
Okay.
Going
so
on to
the shed.
tin corn
Let's
shed.
move to the corn shed.
But, so we're going to dedicate the shed then for architectural and the preservation of context and setting. Everyone agrees with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the tin cord shed, which is like a small silo building that stands directly next to this machine shop, I'm going to call it. That's this building here. And that's basically, I mean, it's a little rusty, but it's structurally sound. It's not caving in or anything. And so,
What's the date of that?
probably I put circa 1900 on the Prosser buildings, being that the family bought the property in 1889. Thought that was a safe time period. And
My favorite one.
so it's from the Prosser time. And any comments on that? Okay. The next is number 6, the privy, which this building here, and this stands at this time directly behind the barn, the older barn, 1790 barn that's collapsed. And this building, it's going to need work, but it's standing. The structure is okay. It needs a new roof. And so the committee decided to dedicate this structure on the site.
So we're dedicating a privy.
Well, yeah. Look,
Okay, no, I was just making the joke. Okay.
again, to answer Larry, putting a roof on this privy and keeping this intact is not a big expense.
I yield.
Yeah, but you have to supply the seat.
You beat me down.
And that,
Okay.
you know, a little roof like this can be just done by our maintenance department. It's not a big job.
Trying to preserve as much of the context of the farmstead as we can, basically.
This will become like an interpretive site where you put signage up as to what was here. And Lori Billadello, who had done the archaeological survey for the Parks Department, discussed things that happened at the park across the street where there were foundations and very interesting archaeological sites that the Parks Department then went and paved over, and it's now parking lots. So this is why she felt very strongly we should dedicate them as archaeological sites so that doesn't happen here, and you lose this resource completely. Okay, number 7 is the stone wall, and that's, you can see underneath the branches here. It's a retaining wall of sorts behind the barn. Again, an interesting feature on site that we didn't want to see removed. And so that's why the committee decided to dedicate it. And this is right behind the barn, so that you'll have like a clear view to this with this small privy. The privy maybe could be used for a kiosk use in a sense where you could have maybe some brochures or tour information of what they're looking at in the future. Any discussion on those? Okay. Okay, now that's all the dedicated buildings and sites.
Well, on the ice
No. You didn't do the ice house, which is the most interesting one of all.
I'm sorry. Ice, okay. Sorry. The ice house here.
I love the ice house.
So realize while we're calling it the ice house, we're just dedicating the foundation. We're not dedicating any of the structure,
Okay.
the wood structure that you see.
All right, just
There's
make that
2
change
pages of-
then, to dedicate foundation only?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
And can I ask you, I'm intrigued by the beams being on the diagonal. Is that something that was typical of ice houses, or what is that?
Well, we're calling it the ice house
Yeah, how did
because
you know
of
it
the
was a nice house?
We don't.
We're guessing from the foundation. It's a very deep foundation, stone foundation. But it looks like in the 20th century, they rebuilt the structure on top of it. That's my educated guess. So you're talking about a 1700s farmstead being used to the early 20th century, and I think they knocked down, when you look at the historic photos, there's barns and different buildings that were knocked down over time. They would reuse the wood, and this I've seen different farmsteads that we own. So I think this is a later structure on top here, is my guess. And these farmers, they just reuse those boards there, could be from like an old barn or something that they tore down.
But is putting them on the diagonal for a structure, is that something that is done elsewhere, or is it just?
I don't normally see it.
See?
No.
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 This whole thing is fascinating, starting with this foundation. And we all stood and tried to guess what the evolution of use had been for what we're calling an ice house. But of all the things on this site, I think this foundation is the most important to preserve. And Lori felt the same way.
Right.
Do we have other ice houses on?
Yes, we actually have one at the Isaac Mills house. It's a brick foundation that we're looking to preserve. I know this at Blydenburg, it's been filled in, but the foundation is still there. There was one at Meadowcroft that was filled in. Historically, people filled them in when they weren't used anymore. So we're not looking to fill this one in. Now we have a chain link fence around it. We keep some sort of fencing around it. And that's, you'll see in the future, I have other foundations, one in Yaphank, one in South Haven, that will also be looking to dedicate. So this is just a way to preserve these sites so Parks doesn't bulldoze them in the future.
Question: were there any ponds nearby where they got the ice, or was the ice trucked in?
Well, you have the
wagon.
Carmen's River and the
Well, I
lakes
know that, but
right across the street from this.
Oh, the Carmen's.
And
right
the
across
Artist
street?
Lake is just to the north.
Okay.
And there was some documentation, I don't know if it worked, that they actually built a ditch for the overflow of Artist Lake to bring it over to the river. Whether that ever, within the reports on the property. So they're all close, water sources. Okay, so that's just to dedicate the foundation. And so that is now the end of the sites to be dedicated. The next 4, which I'll review, are just to be listed. And the main reason is that these are later additions to the farmstead, and the committee thought that we might just list them instead of dedicating.
Yeah, could you clarify that? Because the Historic Trust Manual differentiates between dedicated and listed, and I want that this is pursuant to the manual. I don't like this listed historic trust, because somebody's going to misread this in the future and say, well, it's dedicated to the Historic Trust.
Okay. So
How should that's a good point, how should that read? Listed, not to Historic Trust, but listed.
Well, there's 2 separate CEQ resolutions that have minor variations in the wording. The dedicating resolution is the one that's going to go across to the legislature. The listing resolution does not. It stays within the CEQ.
But should we say list to the Historic Trust?
But what is it? What is it?
Yeah, what does that mean?
read?
Shouldn't it just be listed as?
Do you have a copy of the manual with you?
yep.
Yes.
Listed pursuant to the Historic Trust Manual, or something like that. I was identifying the Historic Trust.
Well, or
Manual.
if you could clarify by saying listed as contributing to the historic site.
Yeah, but
No, let's just see what it
All
says
right.
in the manual.
What are the dates of these?
George Prosser died in 1944, and I think just looking at these houses and sites, I gave a circa date of 1930. So they were still, and then, the family used these homes up until the county purchase in 1969. But I think after he passed away, that the construction probably stopped on the site.
They are rented, which gives this particular site some security.
They're rented by the county.
Yeah, it's
They're in the rental units.
2 houses under our housing
They're
program.
under the housing program.
And they're
so-
in good shape.
And they're
All right, this reads,
Bungalows.
listing, the act of placing a property and/or structure with county, community, and contextual historic significance under the jurisdiction of the Suffolk County Historic Trust by means of a CEQ resolution, not a legislative resolution, which shall specify the purpose or purposes for which the property and/or structure may be used. Suffolk County Historic Trust, which is the CEQ, must then review and make recommendations on all structures, management decisions regarding the property. That's the whole purpose of the list.
yes.
They're not dedicated.
No.
However, Parks wants to do something to those structures. They have to come back to the CEQ because of their historic, potential. The property and/or structure may not meet all of the full criteria of dedication to the National Register of Historic Places, but possesses unique historical characteristics worthy of preservation. So
So why don't we say listed through the Historic Trust as per the definition of the section in the
Well,
manual or something?
basically CEQ should recommend that the first properties be dedicated, and that should go to legislature, and a second resolution should be adopted by the CEQ listing these structures pursuant to the Historic Trust manual, and that
And
does
Jim,
not go to legislature.
That's why I mentioned in the beginning we need to do 2 resolutions. Okay, so the shed, the 3 buildings and the 1 site that we're looking at, the garage here, and this has been, the exterior's been modernized a bit, the framing inside's a little bit earlier, again I think about 1930s or so, but didn't have enough early interest to the site that we thought it had to be dedicated. And so obviously in the history here you're looking at a 1790s, an 18th century farmstead coming into the 19th century, going into the 20th, and the importance of the site being, the overarching importance is this pine grove, which again is the 19th century development there. So it's really the 19th century is the high point of what the importance of the site. And so the items that were in the 20th century we're viewing as not as important, and that's why they're listed.
I would make a recommendation here that if we're going to list these things, it says that the CEQ resolution shall specify the purpose or purposes for which the property and/or structure may be used. So I'd like you to take these back there and enhance these recommendations.
Well, we can do it now. This would be simple to do now.
Okay.
As part of the. That would be easy, Jim, to do now. So the garage for use, I just recommend for storage. Continued storage use in the park.
Do you want to use the use category from the manual?
Functional.
Functional.
Okay, for the garage. The next one we have is this loading bay foundation, which is poured concrete, and again 20th century, so we were just listing it. And again, to explain the listing, we think it's of interest to the development of the site, but let's say if we had an interpretive program that we did want to take that out someday, this gives us that opportunity if we wanted to clear that site to bring it back to its 19th century look of a field, because this was a pasture in the historic photographs in this area. So that gives us the flexibility to decide that in the future.
Would the use category be like an archaeological?
Right, it would be museum.
Museum?
Right. Okay,
And the bungalows.
And then the 2 bungalows, again, about circa 1930, the Prosser family homes. And we listed the both, and they would both be functional. And they're both in our housing program now, and they're in
make
good.
a note of that they're both in the housing program and currently
Yes.
occupied.
Yes, and in good condition.
Yeah.
Usually I'm a tea drinker.
All right, so we've listened to all of the descriptions of all the properties, hashed out, I think, the clarifications of what we feel is important about them. So it's time to have a resolution.
2 resolutions.
Well, first, we'll do one at a time. All right? We'll have a resolution.
Don't look at me. I don't want to
Anybody?
touch this one. Basically, how adopting the recommendations that we've all been talking about, is that easy enough to do? The first one, right, I'll try and make a motion. As the Historic Trust, the properties that we've talked about dedicating to the Historic Trust, that we present that to the legislature, if I understand it correctly. And then the companion motion would be, I believe for CEQ purposes, that the properties we've been talking about listing, and not dedicating, but listing for the purposes announced around this table and in the forms that we've been given, be basically set forth and adopted by this group as a listing.
And put in the handbook.
And, okay, put in the handbook.
Pursuant to the Historic Trust
Pursuant to
Manual.
the Historic Trust Manual.
Second.
Seconded by Mary Ann. All in favor?
Well, I have a
Question?
Yeah.
Motion.
I thought we were done.
Well,
Okay, hold on. Larry?
I just want to know what will be the process of trying to preserve some of the artifacts of from the buildings that are going to be torn down. Will you be present, or Nick, or
Or the archaeologist?
Staff from Historic Services will be present. When we've already discussed this with a contractor that we've worked with in the past that is sensitive to this
okay, so you
idea. So they can't just go in and just bulldoze the site because we want to keep the foundations. So we're going to have to carefully, pull the stuff out to remove it, and at that point we can pick out some of the architectural features that we want to keep.
Jim?
I think the legislative resolution, or the CEQ's resolution, should point out that the first properties, that it's a rededication for the purposes of clarification. I mean, these are already dedicated as far as this site is
That's nice.
concerned.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I think the
Rededication,
legislature has to
clarification.
understand that this is not something new coming out of the CEQ.
Right.
This was previously dedicated, and for purposes of classification, that these
Clarification.
individual structures be rededicated.
Yeah.
I adopt that language as part of my
And
motion.
Mike, you're still thinking like a whole new resolution, though, but that could have that in the clauses.
Yeah, in the
to explain it.
whereas, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So as part of my motion, officially I adopted what Jim just,
Okay, any other
What's that?
questions? Okay, is there a second?
Mary Ann seconded.
Mary
I
Ann,
did.
I'm sorry.
I'll,
Yes, you
I'll do it
did.
again.
Sorry. Okay, they passed.
Do we?
Well,
We gotta vote.
everybody
Oh.
vote. How are we voting? It passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First time I've ever dedicated a privet.
We've dedicated them before, believe it or not.
There are people on Long Island who collect privies. Trust me.
I've dug up one or
But
two.
they just take the structure, not the whole.
They
So
do. They
just-
see one going down, and they pick it up and put it on their truck and take it home and put it on their farm, and then they've got several. And, yeah.
5 holes.
Each his own.
Yes.
Okay, on to project review.
No miles.
Recommended unlisted actions. A, proposed acquisition for open space preservation purposes known as Mastic Shirley Conservation Area, Kramer Property, Town of Brookhaven.
Good morning.
Good morning, Loretta.
Before you, our first proposed acquisition is a .46 acre parcel in the Mastic Shirley Conservation Area. As you can see on the map, this property actually has a residential structure on it situated within the tidal wetland area of the Sheephen Creek Peninsula. This area is extremely low-lying, high flood area, both A and B zone flood zones. And the county has been working to acquire these small old file maps for more than a decade. This property and this structure is an older residential structure, doesn't meet today's flood zone codes. And the structure itself will be demolished before acquisition.
Was this flooded totally during the storm?
This area was flooded, but actually the structure survived.
You're kidding me.
Wow.
No. But,
It'd be so much easier if we had a red flag on it.
Yeah, it's amazingly so. But other structures in the area did go down. So we would like to add this to our assemblage of properties within the Massac Shirley Conservation Area.
Who's going to remove it?
Yeah.
Actually, the county's going to be removing it as part of the cost of the acquisition.
What do you mean as part of the club? We're going to pay
We're going to
the...
Reduce the
You're
amount we
reducing
pay
the price
for
to pay?
of the cost
To the
value of
homeowner?
property to
remove
the
it.
owner.
Mike?
Loretta, just curious, the master list properties marked in yellow on our map, are there any proposals right now to build on those properties?
Not that I'm aware of.
Given the most recent storm.
Right. And we are in the process of reevaluating our master list and updating it.
Thank you for all your hard work.
You're welcome. And we will be making recommendations, moving those forward that we have not acquired to date.
This is fine.
Especially in areas like this, obviously would take priority.
Motion unlisted. Like that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have, to add to the neg deck, I'd like to put in there that the structures will be removed prior to the county taking the property, and that the appropriate asbestos survey will be done on the structure, and any asbestos materials will be disposed of pursuant to, legal requirements.
Is it, did somebody
No,
ask
before
this?
transfer to parks.
If the county is removing the structure, how can it be removed before the county takes ownership?
Before Parks gets it, maybe.
Prior to parks.
Right.
Yeah, because if you require the structure to be moved, removed prior to acquisition, then that's a burden on the homeowner. It should be done, the county buys, and then before it puts it into the park category, that's when it...
The assessment calls for an asbestos survey. Has that been done in terms of, and then you say that you're going to deduct the disposal cost from the price of the property, but has that survey been done? Has it been found out what the cost is going to be for disposal? I mean, we had a shed in Lake Ronkonkoma, an old trailer, cost $35,000 just to dispose of the materials in it because of the asbestos.
Easy.
So I'm just wondering what's been done, Janet, on the disposal costs, so to say.
Well, there should have been a survey of this property, environmentally.
Well,
But nothing
it
has been done.
recommends that be done and that any asbestos materials be disposed of pursuant to law. And the county's going to go in there and say, well, we're going to remove the property, the house, and therefore we're going to deduct it from the cost, but yet what is it going to cost to remove this structure?
Well, there was no heating system present in the house when the ESA was completed.
Well, it's got asbestos shingles. That was identified, period.
I'm
Said the full survey should be done.
I'm just going through what was noted in the report. And they recognized a private water supply well, which is no longer utilized and will be abandoned. Asbestos shingle was observed. The building is to undergo major renovation or demolition. Asbestos survey should be completed.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So have we done that? Are we finding out what the cost is and what the disposal is?
I can't remember. Was there a phase 2 done on that? I'm sure there was. When, do you remember?
No.
No, there was just the phase one.
Just the phase one?
And they've just recommended the asbestos survey if the building's going to be demolished and if we're going to acquire it to abandon the well.
Those were the two points that were raised.
Know something?
So we are going to demolish it, so the asbestos survey has to be done.
We're going to have to do the asbestos survey. We're going to have to abandon the well.
Do we have to do it
Though
before
the price of
we
that,
approve
I guess, is going to have to be determined and then taken off the price of the.
So that has to be done first with an actual
actually, no,
cost.
because the price of the acquisition, because it's a developed lot, what gives it value, the highest and best use of the property, which is what we pay, is because there is a structure on there. And he can renovate it if he wants to. It's an old bungalow up on stilts that was built so well that everything else around it flooded during Sandy, but this structure is still standing. And there was no cesspool, there's no heating, there was, like Loretta said, running water. But the value of the lot is in the fact that there's a structure on it. So that's what we had to offer. And the demolition, because we want it demolished, we would have to incur that ourselves.
Oh, so it's not
Out of acquisition money as, what did Karen call it? Like supplemental, kind of like soft costs.
The first resolve has that in there. Specifically says there's a total purchase price of blank, subject to final survey, and authorizes additional expenses which shall include but not be limited to surveys, appraisals, environmental audits, etc. And that would cover the county's committing to spend what it needs to take it and dump it.
Is that a change, though, from the past? This is the first I've heard of that
This is
scenario.
an unusual situation.
It has. I understand it's highest and best use to
Right.
someone else, but to the county, it's highest and best use. The reason we're acquiring this property is for open space.
That doesn't matter. The appraisals are done as highest and best. Appraisals on a piece of property are done for market value, what a willing buyer and a willing seller would pay for the property.
Doesn't have to be what we want to pay for it, though.
No, it has nothing to do with what the government wants, because then you're going into it like a teeth account.
Yeah, the final use doesn't matter for
Highest
our
and best
purposes.
use is
But then don't offer the full value.
No, you have no choice. That's what the
Highest and
appraisals
best use.
are supposed to come in. If there's a structure on there and it's capable of being used, the appraisal values go up. Okay, because it is capable of being used. So you are buying it as a single-family structure. Again, the ultimate governmental use, which is basically to knock it down, is inconsequential, and that's not considered when you're appraising a piece of private property. If you did a Fifth Amendment taking, for example, okay, let's say government wanted to take this, they would still have to do that exact same appraisal. It's an existing one-family house, presumably with permits or non-conforming.
It's not habitable. It has no septic tank. It has no cesspool.
But
it
it
has
still has a structure on there.
I understand
and
that,
it is
but you
permitted
can't.
under the town of
You
Brookhaven
can't
Code.
But that's why
inhabit
it only appraised for 40.
low.
Yeah, it doesn't have a made.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, one of the houses in the islands that got washed away. Those things had appraised value to them, even though basically they had no way of really dispersing their septics. They had no electricity. Sometimes they had a well. Sometimes they had to bring stuff in, but they still, for tax purposes and for other purposes, they were appraised as an existing structure. So you can have a dead structure, really not capable of doing anything, but because it exists, it has been improved, and that knocks appraisal value up.
For the purposes of this committee, the value is inconsequential.
Yeah.
As long as the asbestos and the well are taken care of prior to transfer to parks, we should be okay.
Yeah, and that's all that's required.
the structure is removed. But
Right.
what was said here is that the removal of that structure from the property will be deducted from the purchase price, which is the county, which is incorrect and should not be stated anymore.
No, the whereases, the first and fourth, clearly say authorizes additional expenses on the acquisition. So if that's what the county's going to be undertaking, that has no application to the PP on this one, purchase price.
Larry?
I don't think we ought to purchase it. It can't be used for anything. and the structure can't be expanded because of wetlands and so forth. And so it's about as isolated as it can get. And so why should the county spend its money on this piece of property when it's not going to be doing anything other than paying outrageous fees?
You're making an a priori assumption that it can't be done. We don't know that. Okay, the zoning is I don't know what the zoning is down there.
There's
Yeah, but it is a developed property. They probably could put something in there.
remember, it's Brookhaven Town.
Brookhaven Town.
Yeah. Okay. And they've got running water.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can they get
Septic.
can they get
could put
health
something
department
They
approval?
live in there.
Even without a cesspool, there are procedures. I believe there are procedures wherein you have your septic waste stored and trucked out.
Well, somebody
Nobody
from the
likes
health
to do
department's
it.
here. Is that the
Hey,
county
hey,
allow that? I don't
true?
think so.
I don't
That's
think
not my
so.
department to comment on, but I don't believe that's.
I don't think
That's
it's
true.
either.
But I'm not.
That's not
okay.
true.
That's not true.
I agree with you, Jim.
They won't even accept the Clivus Maltrum, which is a composting toilet in Suffolk County.
I got one through once, so.
Okay, I have reservations also of purchasing this property,
So
and the
do I.
location it is, and the higher sea levels, and storm surges, etc., and what is the point that we'd have to then pay more to get it knocked down?
I agree.
I must say that, you know, the action before the CEQ is to purchase this property and the removal of the building. And recommendation, you know, unlisted negative declaration with the qualifications that the structure be removed and the water supply be closed before, and any septic be filled in before it's transferred to parks. I think that stands in and of itself. I think in the cover letter, the council can make a recommendation to the legislature that they don't think that this is a worthwhile.
Technically, I agree with you. We're being presented
Expenditure.
with something right now
So
to the legislature.
You have
We're
to
supposed
rule on it
type
from an environmental point of view. You can make your recommendation in a cover letter to the legislature.
I would
If
adopt
you don't
that.
think it's worthy of the county spending
Is
its
this a
money on.
master list? Is this yellow and then red?
No, we did not include properties that were improved on the master list, at least
I
in
made a
this
motion, so
section.
I'll
There were properties that were included on the master list, and we recommended acquiring part of the property, the undeveloped portion of the property. But in this situation, we would recommend acquisition due to the fact that it is in a very vulnerable location, and that we do have significant holdings in here. We do not want to see further development in this extremely vulnerable flood zone, be it redevelopment or new development. And, you know, the intent of the program is to protect environmental characteristics of this area, and foremost being the vulnerable flooding that occurs down here almost on a daily basis.
Jim?
I have a question. Is that going to be a new county policy that we acquire all these houses that got flooded out that were built in flood zones, and now people are having problems, so now we should go in there and make deals with them so that we can buy their properties?
There's actually
Well,
a
quite
reso on that.
honestly, that is something that the county is evaluating at this point.
2108, studying the preservation of sensitive properties damaged by Hurricane Sandy, Browning. So that's one of the
I mean, but
resolutions.
it's not a law yet.
No,
And
no.
this is not on the list for acquisition.
It's on,
Rich.
it was put in as planning steps by legislator
Well, I
Brown.
understand that, but it's not on the master list.
Rich?
If we did what Larry suggests and what others have suggested and not purchase the property, and the owner of the property said, well, okay, I'm gonna go live on it. It's gonna cost them a lot of money to get this property in shape to live on, okay? I wonder what would happen if we just let it be, and 3 or 4 years down the line, he stopped paying taxes on it.
And we get it as a gift.
And we just get it that way.
Or ask them to give it as a gift.
There's no guarantee that that will happen.
There's no
Quite
guarantee,
honestly.
there's no guarantee, but given Sandy and the probability of Sandy happening again, or something near Sandy, I suggest that the guy would be a fool to try to
But there
Rehabilitate
there
that
are
property.
other
His name is
options
CRA
for him,
and
i.e. he sells the property to an individual who may have the funds to wait and do whatever requirements are of him to
Well,
improve the site.
You know, I think
And,
that's,
with less and less, waterfront properties available, that, that pool of properties becomes less and less. And that situation
It's like-
certainly is available.
it's like giving people money to rebuild houses on Fire
Mhm.
Island.
Well, that's the insurance problem.
Washed out
Mike?
into the ocean.
First off,
We're
just
buying
for
up.
information, I note that there's a rather large series of structures immediately to the north of there.
What is that?
But this is what I would suggest. I made a motion a moment ago, just straight unlisted. My suggestion is that we vote that one up or down, and if it fails, then a motion should be made that it be listed on unlisted neg deck with recommendations if the group so sees it. Personally, I believe I happen to agree with Loretta on this one. There's a lot of ifs, and we're starting to intrude into, if you will, guessing games as to what might happen in the future. We have a structure, it didn't get washed out, and there is stuff in the area. People are going to try and rebuild over here, and even if there are impediments with cesspools, just because he didn't build a cesspool, I don't know that he can't. And there is access over here. I clearly see a road in this area, and there is construction to the north. And people do strange things, is all I can tell you.
Larry?
So
The
that's
county
what I think we
has
should
the
do.
cards with whether they ever want to put a cesspool in.
Sorry, what did you say, Larry?
The county holds the cards about putting in a cesspool.
Yeah, but it may be applicable. We don't know that they can't. I don't have a soil analysis over here. Just because it's close to the water doesn't mean they can't. Just because we want it, we don't know. It's guessing games that we're playing. No, that's my motion. I think we should do it. My motion up or down, and then second motion if mine fails.
Any other comments? All right, Mike, make a proper motion. and state it.
All right, first motion. Motion, unlisted negative declaration.
With the caveats I mentioned, the
Yeah.
house
No.
has to be removed and the septic, the water supply.
Prior to
Prior
putting
transfer
into
to
the
parks.
parks system. Okay. Do I get a second?
Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay, all in favor?
I lose.
2.
Consistent.
No, wasn't I? Got a motion earlier. All right. All right, then motion.
The thing is that resolution that he just made does not recommend buying the property. It just says if the county does buy the property, it's an unlisted action and a neg deck.
Right.
Yep.
So what are we going to say about purchasing the property?
Well, that's the second motion. Mine apparently
you
failed.
could do the secret motion as the resolution, and in
As
the
the resolution.
transmittal memo,
As a-
put a recommendation that
That it not be
the
purchased.
CEQ does not agree with the
And we put down the reasons
acquisition.
we've discussed.
But as far as the actual legislation and the secret review, the resolution can just recommend the unlisted neg deck.
I'll try it again then.
Okay.
Second motion. Unlisted, negative declaration that the property be, as part of the motion still, that the water system be shut off, asbestos removal be performed if necessary, after acquisition, prior to placing in the Parks Department, and with a recommendation that the county not necessarily purchase this property for, and this is where I'll throw the burden on Mike, for the reasons enunciated around this table, basically that it is in a floodplain, possibly vulnerable to storm action, whatever other reasons you could put in.
It's not on the master list.
It's not on the master list. What else? What other reasons did we have?
I'll go back and listen to the minute.
That's the motion.
I'll second it if you'll take necessarily out of that. You said not necessarily.
Okay,
Not purchase.
It's okay.
Not-
In
Okay.
that case, I second.
Okay. All in favor? 6.
Yeah, I'll abstain on that one.
Mike, you abstain?
Yeah, I'm allowed to.
You make the motion and
Robert's
abstain?
rules say you can. Just bringing it up on the table.
Okay, Loretta, B,
Okay.
proposed acquisition for active recreation purposes known as the Rollstone Avenue Park, Town of Iceland.
Okay, this proposed acquisition is for active recreational use under the Regional Protection Program to acquire 14.06 acres in the hamlet of David and Iceland. There are two parcels and a right-of-way as part of the area to be acquired. The two parcels will be an outright acquisition, and we will be acquiring the right to utilize the right-of-way for access, ingress and egress into the two parcels from Rollstone Avenue on the eastern side of the map. This will be an acquisition by the county with a partnership with the town of Islip. The town of Islip will be responsible for improving and maintaining the parcel. The site plan proposed is to include 3 multi-purpose playing fields, a playground area, concession stand, attendant parking and access drive. An 8-foot fence is proposed around the entire perimeter of the site. A portion of the southern property line, which abuts single-family homes, is proposed to be maintained as a buffer area with existing natural tree growth to remain and be supplemented with additional screen planting. The children's playground area and a 1,300 square foot concession stand is proposed to be located in the northeast corner of the site as shown on your site plan map. Parking and an access drive will be adjacent to the railroad on the northern side of the property. There are anticipated and proposed 230 parking spaces with an access drive of 24 feet in width. There was a traffic analysis conducted by the town of Islip, and Dave Genoway from the town is here to give you an overview of that study. Dave, if you could give them your comments.
Okay, morning everybody, nice to see everybody again. Okay, we have some traffic numbers for you. We did, first of all, we just wanted to do some prep work and really try to do 2 sources of projected traffic generation, and the first source was the standard ITE manual. It's the Institute of Transportation Engineers manual, wherein they do studies all over the country and publish those results. The second source of traffic was, at least for existing counts, was our own traffic counts that we did on a peak hour during the Saturday peak hour. In terms of ITE, we are calculating that there would be roughly 90 vehicle trips during the peak hour. Again, Saturday is the Saturday peak hour. Between 11 to 12:30 is, from 11:30 to 12:30 is the projected peak hour for this use. An additional source of projected traffic impacts was a very similar type of use. It's called Baseball Heaven. Some of you may know this. It's an existing athletic complex on the west side of Sills Road, Route 101 in Yaphank. And even though we felt comfortable with the ITE numbers, we wanted to be even more conservative and use some existing vehicle counts. Based upon known traffic generation at Baseball Heaven, it was anticipated that the number of trips generated might go up to 120 during the peak hour. So in consultation with your own DPW along with our traffic safety division, we wanted to just determine if any mitigations were warranted based upon those traffic numbers. And again, going back to ITE and the manual of traffic generation devices, it was identified that a stop sign or a controlled intersection was not warranted at this time. Basically, 300 vehicles during the peak hour are really the triggers for much greater levels of traffic mitigation. So in this case, the primary intersection that was studied was Rollstone Avenue and Brook Street. At this point, even with known traffic counts on peak Saturday morning hours, all of the existing ambient traffic, in addition to any traffic generated by the new use, did not exceed 300 trips per hour, and therefore the DPW, your DPW, and our own traffic safety division, we're not making any recommendations that new traffic stop signs be installed. The other element that's true here is that because the relationship that's modeled here, wherein the county would be purchasing the property, the town would be a primary steward and manager of the property, and then in turn we're reserving the right to create relationships with concessionaires who could manage or operate the park for us. We have control over scheduling, the number of games that would be occurring at the same time, or requiring offsets that each of the starting times for each of those games could be offset, so that the expected number of car trips would be minimized. Again, the baseball heaven experience using those numbers is quite conservative. We don't believe that those numbers will be achieved, but in order to be conservative in the study, we wanted to do worst case scenario. And what we've discovered is that even if we did do worst case scenario, we're still falling under those threshold numbers for requiring a new stop sign. One additional layer of study that we did was for parking generation. At this point, you can see, I'm not sure if everyone can see the plan here, there are 230 parking stalls proposed for the site. Even in the aggregate, when we're looking at maximum occupancy, we're looking at about 224 cars. Worst case scenario would be occupying the site at one time. So we're making sure to show at least 230 stalls on the property. So that's a little bit of traffic information. I'll hand it back over to Loretta, and we've got, if anyone's got any questions, we've got a much greater level of detail that we could go into as well.
Rich?
So that's just that's sort of the traffic analysis.
Have you had community meetings with the neighbors?
We have a bit of history.
I should think so.
Yes, extensive history in terms of the planning of this. It's been many years in the making. Some of you may remember that we actually, as a town, we had a major subdivision request for 27 detached single-family dwellings here on the property. The existing zoning is residence AA. General yield, with or without a TDR or the purchase of Pine Barrens credits, was about 26 to 27 homes. So just through normal town law, many public hearings occurred in connection with the subdivision request. As you can see, and it may be difficult to see from this plan, I do have an aerial here if anybody wants to see the details. The primary access to this property is from a 30-foot right-of-way coming from Rollstone Avenue. Many of the community's concerns were about the access to and from the property. We have had extensive study and research about trying to find alternate ways to get into this property, and believe me, we've tried to diligently search for alternatives, and unfortunately we found none. So therefore, even a 27-home major subdivision would have been using this primary access point, even though it was only 30 feet wide. So stemming from those somewhat controversial public hearings in connection with a major subdivision, the planning board did not grant final approval for the major sub. Following that, it became evident that perhaps a county acquisition program could have been used to purchase the property. Legislator Lindsay had a great interest in this. I think his office was getting some phone calls because the neighbors, given the two choices of a potential county acquisition for 3 ball fields versus 27 homes, the neighbors generally favored the active recreational use. So legislator Lindsay himself had many community meetings with the neighbors, and the general consensus was that this was the way to go. That's not to say it's not without controversy. Obviously, inevitably there's always a focused vocal minority that has some concerns with the application. However, the general ambient public view of the application is favorable.
Well, it seems to me that there are 13 homes there whose backyards will back up
37.
on this right of way. Okay,
37 all around the property.
and you're talking about over 200 cars on a Sunday morning with kids screaming and yelling and playing God knows what.
Are they going to drown out the railroad,
You're going
though?
to tell me that there was no opposition from these folks here. I guess I got to believe you. If that's what you're saying.
Somebody said.
There are concerns here, but
He said
relatively
that they'd
speaking,
rather-
absent a formal taking or an eminent domain, the alternative was an as-of-right residential subdivision.
Yeah, Mr. Genoway, I have a
Yeah.
few questions, though. I live in Sayville, so I'm very aware of the initial
Yeah.
community opposition to the private development of this former greenhouse property, and how up in arms everybody was. As it turns out, that developer at that time was going to actually buy somebody's house on one of those interior little roads and make his entrance into his property, so those people wouldn't be coming in Rollstone directly.
Yes.
So it wouldn't have impacted Rollstone really at all.
Yep.
And it was, like I always thought, about 30 houses. But these 3 ball fields you show on your drawing, it says multiple use. I mean, what do you see? Which type of sports do you see playing on these fields?
Well,
What
our
is this
primary-
projected to be used for?
Yep. Our primary discussions with our concessionaire has been the Sayville Lacrosse Club. Mr. Kaminsky has been instrumental in those conversations. So lacrosse was identified first, but luckily the dimensions of a lacrosse field are similar to soccer and football as well. And in fact, if the grading can be done right, you could even do baseball here. We're not talking about permanent striping of fields. So even baseball could exist on the property as well. At this point, we don't want to limit our relationships with our concessionaires, wherein the land would be used exclusively for the use of one community group. So we have been speaking with Sayville Football and Sayville Little League as well.
I don't know anything about the sport lacrosse except that Native Americans invented it, but how many players are on a team? So let's say, I mean, if you had, do you know? Could you tell me?
I believe it's 7 per team per
So you
per
have
contest.
14, and then you have the parents, and then you have...
But depending on the age of the team,
Yeah.
Right,
you
there
can
may be
have 30
variables.
kids on
Because
a
they're backup
team
players.
because they
Yeah.
have a whole string of players.
So if
And
all
so-
3 fields are filled at once, the potential for how many cars, how many parents driving, and how many kids?
Well, actually, we have some details on that.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to get an idea.
Yep.
There are 10 players on the lacrosse team at the field.
Okay. When we do a translation from the baseball heaven numbers, if we prorate that out, we're talking about a maximum of 144 vehicles to be parked if all 3 fields
Okay,
were
that's what I was
occupied
trying
at
to
once.
find out.
Right. But again, the reason it went up to 230 was that there's also a concession stand and a playground. As I understand it, part of the rules of this, and I'll defer to Loretta on this, is that part of the rules of this acquisition fund are that the money can't be used to create an active recreational use for the exclusive use of one community group, but rather it has to be open to all residents of the county.
Right.
So yeah, so there is a little bit of an additional number that would go up by virtue of the fact that it's a county park
Open
as
to
well.
all county
Right, but
residents.
right now the soccer little leagues, I'll call them, they have that huge field at Cherry
Yes.
and Terry
Yeah.
Road.
Bayman Soccer, yeah.
Do they feel that Do they feel that they're running out of space and they need more, that they might utilize this? Has anybody reached out to them?
We have discussed this with them. At this point, they're relatively happy with their own site now on Cherry, just north of the railroad tracks, which is why the larger demand has been lacrosse, football, and baseball rather than soccer. Although we don't want to eliminate soccer from the table. But at this point, the Bayman Soccer Club is relatively self-sufficient.
And when you say concessions, can you please describe to me what this particular concessionaire would be?
Sure. Well, concessions, I use the word concessionaire as in the entity that we would partner with as a town to operate and manage the land for us. It would involve initial development of the park with our assistance as well, and I can get into details about that, along with park maintenance and basically running it, providing security, providing maintenance, lawn mowing.
Okay, because to me, concessionaire means little buildings built to sell refreshments, and I'm like, are you doing that?
Right. I'd say the concession stand with a small c, I guess, would be very, it's a 1,300 square foot building with combination bathrooms and a small
So there would be something.
snack shop.
Hot dogs.
All right, okay.
Actually very similar to Bayman's complex.
I was going to say, the county purchases the property, the town operates the facilities. The town put money in their own capital budget and program to build these facilities. Do they have a contract ready to be signed by a concessionaire to build these facilities? I mean, we've been in the past, we've purchased properties, and the towns haven't done anything, and we end up with a property and there's no facilities at all.
Yep. We have on two fronts, both in terms of the money and the commitment. The commitment is alive today in the form of a town board resolution. Actually, to get to this point, in working together with Loretta, we needed to show that we meant business. So our town plan? What's that?
You have a business plan?
We do actually. The town board adopted a resolution that basically said, we're on board. We guarantee that our Parks Commissioner, who is now, I believe, your Parks Commissioner, Greg Dawson, was instrumental in this as well. Greg met with us many times, and especially because the planning department was willing to pay for it, was willing to commit to guaranteeing the county legislature that this property would be operated as an active recreational use. So we have not yet formalized any specific relationships with concessionaires. However, the town board resolution that exists today already guarantees that the town will be doing that. In terms of the money, we have, yes, here's a copy of it, and I'm not sure if it's in your packets or not, but there's a copy of the resolution here if you want to see it. In terms of the money, most of you are probably aware of the New York State Park alienation process. In connection with a parallel project in Hauppauge, the town sold 1 acre of land to the Hauppauge Public Library. In order to do that, we were forced to go through an alienation process at the state legislature. It was adopted, and similar to a TDR, the alienation process requires that a receiving parcel be designated as parkland in exchange for the sending parcel, in this case, metaphorically speaking. So even though we constructively abandoned 1 acre of Hidden Pond Park to be used for a library, this property here was sort of formalized as the receiving parcel in that alienation process. Part of the other rules regarding alienation are that any money gathered from the sale or alienation of parkland has to be used for the purchase or development of more parkland. So that's exactly what's happened here. Through that sale, we received $210,000. That $210,000 has to be spent on this land by state rule. $210,000 is not a tremendous amount of money. We would be supplementing that amount of money with an additional pool of $400,000 that we have dedicated in a trust account with the town to be used solely for the development of the park. facilities. So we have committed to all concessionaires at this point, and primarily the Sayville Lacrosse Club, that the town would be using that initial $210,000 to build the road, to build access from Rollstone Avenue. We have not yet committed all of the remaining $400,000 because we want to, frankly, to be honest, we want to put some of the burden on our concessionaire. We want them to develop the property for us, and based upon the business plans that they've submitted to us so far, we believe they can do that. As a safety net, we do have the additional $400,000 to guarantee that this park would be developed for recreational uses.
Okay, Larry.
On your resolution, town resolution, says whereas the town of Islip will be entering into a cooperative agreement with the Sayville Lacrosse Group for the development and maintenance of said properties for active recreational uses, and goes on. My question to our sort of legal people here is, or can we do that? I mean, they're closing the deal with a group, just as Levyville was being a closed deal, and so I'm not the lawyer, so
I wouldn't put too much credence in that.
I
don't think in what you're saying. Basically, if they don't have a deal signed, does that kill what we're trying to deal with? I don't really think so.
I just want to point out, because the Parks Department's been involved in this too, our agreement, the county is entering into an agreement with the town of Islip. So at the time, if the acquisition is to go forward, Islip Town is on the hook for the maintenance of the property until they enter into an agreement with a third party. We understand the concept from the town. That's a town board reso that recognizes the relationship that the town is working on with the third party. The county is going to have nothing to do with whomever that third party is, be it a combination of Sayville football, Bayman soccer, whatever it is. The county does not want any responsibility or commitment to that relationship. Dave knows that. The town of Islip knows that. Our relationship is with the town. So if something is to fall through with that third party, it's going to be Islip's responsibility, and the town understands that.
Yeah.
It does, in the last resolve, it does indicate that if that agreement does not move forward, that the town will take responsibility.
And in terms of the legal model that we're discussing here, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but this has been done before, I think, with the property known as the Wedge. I think it's the property right between North Ocean and Route 112. Hugely successful recreational complex. My kids have played there many times myself. Really developed in a nice professional way, using exactly this model that's contemplated here.
But Dave, they've seen the reverse, excuse me, where these things fall apart. So that's what they're concerned about, not the model or the success. They're concerned about the failure.
But at the same time, we've never stopped anything because of that.
There's safeguards in place so that the county is protected from not having to maintain the facility if that's the fall
And the town's committed, so that's what I want to know.
Right.
Joy?
We have several models in Huntington. One that we have done everything to improve the property, Breezy Park, and we accepted $1 million. The town accepted $1 million from the Cold Spring Harbor Soccer League. And another model,
$1 million?
$1 million for, we have 3 synthetic fields that pay for 1 synthetic field. But another model that the county, I shouldn't call attention to this, but the county purchased the land, and we have so far done nothing with it.
Benjamin?
But it's off Comac Road. But we will. And we have the land, fortunately, that the county purchased. And we will do it.
Karen?
I'm concerned about the buffer along the southern portion between the homes there, that's not thick enough. And I think that you have too many parking spaces. I don't know if there's any way to not do so much asphalting. And then I would be curious, I mean, are we going to approve this without really knowing about the building? You know, do we need to know more, or would we get another shot at that when it would be built?
What we're really approving is the sale of this property.
Okay.
So
Is the building on your plan?
Well, you are approving the use of the property.
Yes, okay.
And the site plan, so you understand that.
All right.
It's not a paved parking lot.
No.
Right.
It's gravel.
It's gravel? Okay. I'm concerned about the people living surrounding it.
Right, so I asked about the buffer.
How do they feel about this now that they didn't want it to have a private developer develop it and have those 30 homes there almost. So legislator Lindsay proposed this as an alternative for this private property owner. And were the residents behind that initially when legislator Lindsay proposed to make it parkland?
That was initially my question, and you never answered it.
It was not without controversy. It had, I would say, on balance, it had less controversy than the subdivision had.
All these people who live along the so-called access road will lose their buffer to the railroad tracks.
Well,
and they'll have, on a Sunday morning.
Right, but it is a right-of-way as it is right now, so there is no guarantee that it would stay wooded.
I understand, but they're still going to lose it. And once again, on Sunday morning, you'll have 200-odd cars coming through there, you know, which right now, how many cars go through there, even if it is a right-of-way?
I'm just trying to tease out the bulk of the community feelings. Would they rather have this with an active park and all the traffic on weekends, really? Or would they rather rethink this and maybe go back to what the original private owner wanted to do?
Just a note on the historic major subdivision request. Due to the access issues on this property, the then developer themselves was trying to seek all kinds of alternatives as well. And I don't know if you can see it here, but and actually it might be even better to see it on the aerial. The developer had contemplated purchasing any one of these properties here adjacent to Matthews Road to provide a southerly access into the property as well. In fact, at that point, it was in the early 2000s, he was offering $100,000 in excess of market value for someone to sell out so that he could get a road up through the south end. As it turned out, the person that was the person who chose to sell was this property right here, right in the cul-de-sac of Matthews Road. And from a planning standpoint and from a traffic safety perspective, what that did is it kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul. There was no net increase in traffic safety because the access to the site was coming in from the south. In short, these homes would have been impacted on kind of a closed loop cul-de-sac system here, equally as these homes would have been here. So we saw no net benefit in doing that. And frankly, when we look at the plan again, I'm not sure if you guys can see it here, but this is the lot right here that was sold out. The net number of trips, 9.41 trips times 27 homes, would have been coming through a cul-de-sac, which was never designed to accommodate that number of trips. So,
going back to my original question, has this plan been presented to the immediate community and asked what they thought about it?
I don't think this version, but from the beginning, Legislator Lindsay has when he was having his meetings with them, they knew that it was going to be 3 multi-use ball fields.
With this access?
Yes.
Okay, so
there was never any intention to buy that other residential property.
So this flag basically was going to be developed. The residents are aware of that.
Correct.
Okay, somehow, some way.
Yep.
Okay, Mike?
How heavy is the demand for ball fields and this kind of stuff in the town of Islip? I know that's a loaded question. I also know, for example, what's going on Carlton,
Yep.
where there's massive development going to be coming in.
It's not off the charts. However, just to give an anecdote, Sayville Lacrosse Club today has a well-formed club, very good foundation, and very well organized. They do not currently have a home. So what they do is they talk to the school districts about permitting for all of their age groups to play on spotty locations around West Sayville area. So there is a known demand for ball fields. In this case, they would finally have a home rather than being relegated to the school districts.
Second question, you have an aerial there, and we have an aerial here. Ours is dated November 7th, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Greenhouses are gone. It looks like greenhouses
Well,
are on
actually,
there.
the aerial is 2010.
Okay.
The map was created in 2012.
Okay, so the greenhouses are gone?
They are.
Yes, they're
Okay.
all gone, and that was subject to phase 1 and phase 2.
Is this going to be a lighted ball field?
No.
I have a quick question. Is this area served by sewers at all, or is the concession going to be on septic?
On-site septic.
On-site septic.
Yeah.
That
But it would be, I believe it would meet the past muster at County Health. There's 14 acres here for, you know, a boys and girls bathroom.
which is outlined in the...
Well, Larry took my question, which was the lighting, but in terms of, you've talked a lot about the traffic in terms of impact on the neighbors. You say no lighting now. Will the part of the condition of the sale or the purchase of this property be that there never be lighting? You're putting in a multi-use ball field. Let's say baseball wants to come in and they want lights.
If CEQ or the legislature did not create that limit, we would. This is something that we felt very strongly about. It would be a pretty significant adverse impact if you ask us. We would be incorporating prohibitions on lights into our agreements.
Mike?
Any resolution that we do should incorporate what Mary Ann just brought up. I'll note one thing for the record. This is, I believe, and you can answer this, Gloria, this is one of the main lines of the LIRR. This is the main South Shore line. Okay. It's relatively heavily used, and you can hear the traffic from the railroad a fair distance. Are there any plans in terms of the buffers along that right-of-way? I think that's really going to be one of the areas of contention, or issue, if you will.
Well, part of the issue that we have here is that the railroad tracks are elevated. So what we need to do is, as we develop this road, we have to make sure that we're stabilizing the slope as it comes down to the right-of-way.
How many
So-
feet is the access road?
Actually, it's in the report it says 24, but that's only at the mouth of it. It actually flares out to 30. We've discussed this with the.
No, I mean
The
length.
Oh,
1,777.
Is there any landscaping that could be done such that the homeowners to the south would be protected somewhat?
Yes, not only for noise attenuation, but for slope stabilization.
Well, you get kind of both.
Yeah.
Jim?
Yeah, you're going to put speed bumps on this road so that people will make it a racetrack?
We will. Yep. Including, and we've agonized over this with our traffic safety division and the fire and emergency services people as well. 30 feet is enough to allow two-way traffic, a dedicated sidewalk with bollards to separate any pedestrian access from vehicle access.
You're talking 10-foot or 11-foot road beds?
I believe they were 12-foot road beds per lane, then the series of bollards, and then a dedicated sidewalk.
You can just get them in. If you had to, you could go to 11. The National Transportation, the NHTSA stuff, which I can never figure out the acronym for, does allow for even narrower if you needed it.
You may also, and I think I highly recommend this, that you consider some type of safety fencing to limit access of kids to get over to the railroad right of way.
Yes.
From that narrow strip and that sidewalk.
Yep.
There
That
was-
fencing has been incorporated into our cost estimates for the road.
Okay, not
So-
just chain link, that can be climbed to.
Correct. Yep. I believe it was an 8-foot security fence with the sharp tops, so no one could jump over it.
Is this area sewered?
No.
No.
Yes.
So in other words, any proposed buildings with septic would have to adhere to the Suffolk County Sanitary
Yes.
Code.
Yes.
Larry.
In order to make it more palatable to the local community, could there be a set aside for some area that would not be developed into a ballpark, so that, you know, maybe it's a dog park, or maybe it's swings and
We do have a playground.
Yeah, they have it in there.
A portion of it will stay wooded. If you look at the site plan, Larry, on the western side of the property, this area will stay wooded, and this is where the pool of the playground is.
Dave? Yep. One other question. Looking at the parking situation, and looking at the property, it looks like it's basically been denuded of trees for all intents and purposes.
Yes.
I was going to say, is it possible to land bank some of this stuff and not necessarily develop until you see the actual need?
As Nick was mentioning before, what we're envisioning here is we want to keep it as a bucolic park setting as much as possible. And again, to use an existing precedent, the Bayman Soccer Complex is a gravel parking lot that actually fades into grass as well. So if we look at the southern end of the Bayman Soccer Complex, there's actually a series of kind of creative drainage.
Don't worry, I'm listening.
Rain swales. During peak periods for Bayman, people are actually parking on the grass. It works. From a planning and site planning standpoint, we don't encourage that for our commercial properties, but for our parks it works very well.
Gloria, let me ask you a question then. We've got a lot of questions here. We've gotten a lot of answers. I don't know which way the group is going to go on all of this, but eventually we have to make a motion on this. What do you think, and I would throw this out to the table, I don't want to say conditions, maybe we could do recommendations, I don't know, but what do you think is necessary in a motion if we were to say neg deck on this?
Okay, I have one other issue I would like to discuss quickly before I even go to that, all right? You did say it was going to be a gravel parking lot, Dave. What about the 700 feet of roadway? Is that paved or gravel?
That has to be paved only because if it were not, the use of it would really cause the road to fall into disrepair. So we need this one to meet town standards with a full base course soil compaction, at least a 2.5 inch, 5 inch top course.
My concern is gravel roads, gravel driveways, they're quite noisy. So as all these cars drive down the length of this probably, 800, 900 foot long parking lot, it's noisy.
Yeah.
It's crunch, 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 crunch. And you have one after the other after the other. And I'm thinking of all these homeowners who abut that south property line. That's a lot of noise.
Yes, the linear dimension of where the pavement would go, we want it to go at least several hundred feet into the depth of the property so that it would flare out into the open parking lot. So our cost estimates have it going in about I think 150 feet into the parking lot.
Yeah, and that's farthest away from the houses.
Now, I can't read it. It's so tiny I need a magnifying glass on this. But what is the length of the property from north to south where the playing fields are? So how far away from the parking area are those homes on the south?
Let's see. The eastern property line is 450 feet.
Okay, so that's a good distance.
Yes.
All right, I'm okay with that then.
Yeah.
I was concerned about that.
And again, what you'll see here, Kara, on the southern property line now are some spotty trees. There's some existing trees there. We're requiring of the concessionaire to do some serious infill plantings.
All right.
Street trees on the south end with infill staggered sawtooth pattern of understory plantings.
Pines, things
But
like that.
But it's still only how many feet of buffer?
Yeah.
You know, it could be real significant, but it's still only 20. What is that width of the buffer? You never answered that.
Let's see.
You know, we're not talking about 200 feet of buffer. We're talking about
maximum buffer possible.
Yes.
10 feet, 15 feet.
I don't have a scale here, so I'm not sure what the actual dimension is, Kara, but I'm going to say it's at least 20 feet. Again, if there's any existing natural buffer there, we don't want to remove that, put in new trees. We want to supplement as much as possible.
Rich.
Yeah, so where does my kid leave his bicycle when he brings it in?
You and your bike.
We would be happy to require a
bike
bike lock area.
Bike rack.
Bike rack.
Bike
Yeah.
rack.
All right.
Well,
All right.
just a couple of points on the
Yes,
EAF, because one went to earlier concern. The building itself, on the permits page, there's nothing identified for county DPW. Yes, no type of permit. I would suggest that you mark yes for a building permit. Any objections to that?
What page is that?
8.
Okay.
The permits page.
Well, the septic system for the health department was marked, and you're saying,
No, county DPW
yeah, and
for the building permit for the concession
Concession and
stand.
bathrooms. Yes.
Well, I mean, if the county owns the land, I guess the county would be processing its own building permits?
That's right.
Yes,
But the
but you gotta go to
concessionaire is gonna-
DPW for a permit,
Right.
and the health department for the sanitary code permits.
And then the other item is, Loretta, has this been, I can't remember, we've been working on this so long. Has this been to the trustees?
no, it's gonna have to go before the trustees.
So this will
as
come
well.
also to the Parks trustees, if that gives you any additional.
I was
comfort.
hoping that it would come.
Will it come
before
back
the
to us?
December meeting.
I don't know. He's not going to come back to us after
So
that.
no
No.
building, no
Okay.
No, they
building,
typically, though, run
site plan.
concurrently.
Okay.
It's just a kind of a flaw in the system, but that is the way
Larry?
it typically goes.
So the town resolution is over 2 years old. There could be a considerable change of ownership of the properties. I would like to see the town and the county really sit down with the surrounding property owners and revisit what their view of the world is.
You know something, though, Larry, that everyone's always going to object to any kind of construction coming in. You can make a
I understand
morass
what
out
you're
of this.
saying, Mike, but I feel that this parcel was so opposed by the residents when they wanted to make it a private development. And now this looks like it's almost a done deal with the design and what's going to happen. And the number of car traffic trips, the noise. I think to be transparent to the community that the town and county should have a meeting with the local residents and say this is what has become of this property purchase, since the owners back then did not want, I mean the local area owners did not want to see it privately developed and have that built there.
Or maybe
Legislator Lindsay then created this property to be put into the Parks Department and move forward, and this is what has resulted. I think it's only fair that the community be made publicly aware of what's happening.
Well, let me just say that if you notice on the plan, I think I'm reading this right. I'm having the same problem Gloria's. But
It's too tiny.
I think it's November 2010. Is that right?
Yes.
So this is not as if it's quote unquote a done deal or
All right.
it's a 11th hour type of thing. It has gone through that process, and yes, it is opposed by a host of the local residents there. The legislator, presiding officer Lindsay, did meet extensively with the communities, and he really spearheaded, in my view, that effort to involve and engage them, whether they be for it or against it. And clearly there are some, especially to the south, that are against it, and along Lowellstone as well. However, I would submit that work has been done. This is how many years have we been working on
Oh, okay.
this?
But how recent was that, Nick? Did they see the plan already and have an idea?
This plan has been around
No.
for over 2 years.
David
But
said they have the conceptual
the
plan out
concept
there.
of entering through
Okay,
Rollstone
okay.
and the activity fields behind there, yes. Have they seen this actual individual plan? I don't. The presiding officer had
Yes,
a
he-
plan with him at
yes.
the time.
And my understanding from his representatives over the last few months is that they have continually been in contact with a number of the residents immediately adjacent to this. They have, worked with them to the degree that they've outreached. We can, I don't know,
But the residents are aware of this.
They
That's
also
my
saw
worry.
the demolition
Very
of the
much so.
buildings, the
Yes.
remediation of the
Yes.
site for the
So they know
soil.
something's
It's been
happening.
going on
Yes.
for the last few years as well, and as things have happened and buildings and work has been done on the site, we have, I believe, legislator Lindsay has gotten calls over that time period repeatedly, over and over and over.
All right, would
Including
either,
recently.
would either of you be able to say the community residents, let's say, 50% opposed, 50% agree, or, whatever? Do you have a feeling about it, how most of the community members feel? Do they
I
want
don't
it?
personally. I would defer to the legislator, unfortunately. I don't
Okay.
want
Yeah, but you know something, Gloria? What is your definition of community? Is it the immediate ones or the greater community surrounding it? There is demand for this stuff.
I know that, I realize that, but I just wanted I want the community members that live there to know what's coming down the pike, so they know that this is going to happen, that's all. Marianne?
Do another meeting, it's gonna explode.
Could we do with this purchase what we did with the previous purchase, and that is put in a cover letter? It seems to me that asking that the residents be reapprised, or this kind of concern about the contiguous residents is a legitimate concern to put in a cover letter, but not part of a motion on the purchase.
Okay.
Yeah, I could live with that.
Joy?
I would like to follow through on Rich's comments on bikes. I would like bike lanes marked here in keeping with the complete streets legislation. A bike lane,
Is there room for bike lanes?
I don't know if it's room.
That's pretty
But-
narrow.
You'd have to go 11, 11, 5. You might.
They could possibly
You'd have 3
use
feet for a
the
bike lane,
walkway.
Yeah.
maybe.
I don't know if there'd be room.
But then no
And
sidewalk.
the bollards also.
No sidewalk.
I think
I mean,
it
I'd want the
should be
sidewalk more.
considered.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's where they have.
I think that you get a sidewalk for a bike lane.
access,
Yeah.
a bike lane marked here, because it's a recreational facility, and everyone is not going to be driven to it, I hope.
As part of any reso, then it should be, if possible, bike lane be, if possible. Bike lanes should be marked out, if possible.
They put
Again,
more
that's why I'm saying if possible, because again, if you go down to 11, 11, then you got a foot of separation. I mean, the math just doesn't work. All right, I'm going to try a reso.
I'll try and make a motion.
Okay, is everybody okay with trying one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Good shot.
All right, reso, unlisted, neg deck, with following recommendations, and I'll get into the cover letter. That the buffer to the south be as extensive as possible. That bike lanes, if possible, be placed on the access road. That natural vegetation, to the greatest extent possible.
Slow down. Now.
Okay.
Bike lanes, okay.
If possible, that along all other borders, natural vegetation, trees, be retained to the greatest extent possible. Now, they have a condition in here already that the southern border is going to be reinforced, so I would make that, we strongly suggest the southern border be reinforced, or southern buffer be reinforced. No lights.
And I will add one.
It said no lights?
Long Island
No lights.
Railroad.
Or dark skylights?
No lights.
No lights.
No lights.
No lights.
Okay, fence along.
Security fencing along the railroad right of way.
I could bring of that one.
And
Wanted electrified.
the town, as operator of the facility, shall address the severity of the impact of these additional trips by limiting the number of games to be played on any given day, and by requiring that the timing of the games be staggered, so that the trips from all three fields aren't entering, exiting the facility at once. This document for the traffic says can. I wanted to say shall.
Okay. All right, we'll throw that into the motion.
Also, too, on your things, you say consider, it should shall. I mean, it's got to be something that's going to happen in the neg deck if you're going to put that down as a reason. And I would put down that all Suffolk County Department of Public Works permits will be obtained, and all Suffolk County Department of Health Services permits for sanitary code will be obtained.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Any
other
other questions?
conditions? All right, then. All right, cover letter. What do we throw in there? Anything?
We feel it would be.
Oh yeah, the community should be apprised of the latest status, or updated as to the latest plans. I mean, that's a loaded one, but
Come in with their ding dong.
Who is the community?
Well, that's what I just pointed out. The immediately adjacent, well, actually, Dave, that would be a question for you as a planner. How far wide do you go on something like
Well,
that?
if it were subject to our normal protocol for zoning changes or public hearings, it's a 200-foot radius.
Yeah. And then it's mailings and things like that.
By default, a de facto public awareness will happen far in excess of 200 feet of this anyway.
Well, that's, in which case I think we
because
should
the
maybe
phone will be
leave it
ringing off.
amorphous, that the
You know what I mean?
general, that the public in the immediately adjacent area or in the adjacent area be solicited for further comment. That, I think, sort of covers it.
Okay.
Without making them send out letters, things like that. You know, how grapevines work.
Did you catch all that one?
Sorry, could you?
Okay. By the way, bikes. Bike facilities in the main part of the rest. Okay.
Bike racks.
Bike racks. Forgot that one. Okay. The recommendations. Listen, this is a complex project. Sorry. Okay. On the cover letter, it is suggested by, or recommended by, CEQ that the adjacent community be informed of the latest iteration or latest site plan being proposed so that public comment may be solicited. Does that work for everybody? No?
And a
Marianne?
radius,
No, I don't want to go that
200 feet,
far.
500 feet.
That seems to
Loretta, what
suggest
do
they
you
haven't
say?
been apprised of that, and I'm not sure that that's the case.
Further apprised?
Further.
Of the latest.
Be informed of the latest.
The latest iteration.
You
Call
know,
200
I
feet.
do feel that, legislator Lindsay, I would like to get his input on how he would like to.
Let them know of the latest plan.
Yeah, I mean, we are
Okay.
stepping
Because
into a minefield.
honestly, the onus will be on
Him.
as the sponsor.
All right, so should we send a communication then to Lindsay as to the recommendation? Let him-
This letter goes
This
to
will go
Lindsay.
to him.
Also,
just
too.
would put
Well,
it in
there's
a
another
more
way to
generic
phrase it. You could
recommending.
thank Lindsay for the work that he's done with the community and encourage him to take this latest iteration to them.
All right, that's another way of putting it.
Very good, man.
Sounds good.
I like that.
Also, every
Diplomat.
resolution that goes before the Suffolk County Legislature has a public hearing portion, so anybody
Yes.
from the community can show up.
It goes before committee and
Absolutely.
everything else.
Absolutely.
But Mary Ann's language is very
Yes,
good.
very good.
Mike, are you confused enough now on it?
I get it.
Play the tape.
Calling us out. What did you say?
Play the tape. All right, so that's my 5-minute motion.
Okay.
Any other conditions?
questions, concerns, comments?
Need a second.
Okay. Is there a second for the motion?
I second it.
Thank you, Jim.
Yay, Jim.
All in favor? We have 4. Larry?
Abstain.
Larry abstained.
Oh, so we got Jim,
No, you know,
The other one.
Kaufman, Rich.
Who is it?
Carol left. Is that left?
1, 2, 3, 4,
I don't think we've ever
5,
gone this far.
and we have a quorum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Loretta. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, hold on. Okay, let's move on. Recommended type 2 actions. Ratifications or recommendations for legislative resolutions laid on the table. November 7th, 2012, November 20th, 2012, and December 4th, 2012. Mike, are there any things we should be aware of in these 3?
Nothing major, mostly type 2 actions. You'll see a lot of the sewage treatment plant upgrades that DPW presented and Health Department presented several meetings back. I was going to mention the 2108 that Michael brought up before about the studying the preservation of sensitive properties damaged by Hurricane Sandy, as well as I think it's 2223 appropriating money for some repairs at Blydenburg, I think to the rear of the Miller's house.
Okay.
But it's 2063 is an issue.
1263?
Authorizing emergency barrier island repair agreements.
Wait. 2063?
2063, that's on a different, I'm sorry, that's on November 7th.
Oh, okay, good.
Just pointing it out, I wouldn't.
I mean, it's already adopted.
I know, it's already adopted.
Yeah,
I was
no,
part of
that's
the
done.
It's also an
mechanism.
emergency.
Yeah.
I know, but I don't fully agree with it.
Subject to New York State DEC.
I know, I was part of the agreement. I was part of the, one of the people who wrote it.
Larry, we really.
I just had a question. Mike, do you know whether the ban on using brine from fracking activities passed?
Ooh, I don't know. I'd have to check on that. I believe it did.
Yeah, it
You
did.
don't have to pull the whole
It did, right?
Pretty positive it did.
I
That
can
was
check
Garrett's
on that.
first real big win.
No.
No.
Hers was going to the
STP.
sewage treatment plant, but there was a one just last month, the last time we met, said no salts from fracking could be used on our roads.
All right, that I don't know.
I'll check on that.
Is there a motion that we
Motion
recommend
accept
type
staff
two?
recommend.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Rich. All in favor? Motion passed.
I'm going to use that vote for all three.
Yeah, that's all I can do. Other business, CEQ meeting scheduled for 2013.
No.
Looks like it's the third Wednesday again, except for December, so it's the same schedule.
All right. But
Any concerns? Okay.
And then I have a couple.
Okay, Mike, you have a couple of concerns?
Wait, hold on. Can we vote on that? The meeting schedule?
Motion, adopt meeting schedule.
Seconded by Jim. All in favor?
we need
Motion
to.
passed.
We just keep.
Okay.
Keep putting it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very quickly, in your packets, I had Christine hand out type 2 overviews. The state is changing, as we know from a couple of months ago. The state is changing the type 1 and type 2 and unlisted regulations. I really looked into these because I was asked to lecture at the Planning Federation recently. And I looked into the type 2s, and frankly, I was appalled at what they were really talking about. The ones we saw originally were bad. The new ones that they just came out with, which they're going to start considering under the GEIS that they're doing, is really bad. What it boils down to is it broadens the list of actions not requiring review under seeker, since they're not seen, type 2s are not seen as having significant impacts. If you go through all of this, I am bluntly appalled. They're basically shifting a lot of seeker review into site plan reviews and subdivision reviews, taking away from environmental review and putting it into the hands, for example, of boards that are not qualified to do this or don't really know how to do it. It's going to be consultant heaven because they're going to have to hire consultants. They're allowing all sorts of development that would otherwise have full reviews. I know from a village standpoint, my inner NIMBY jumps out pretty badly and starts saying, what the heck are they doing? They're going to kill the villages. Basically, they're going to be allowing any development on 4 lots or less, or 10 acres or less, to go through basically without environmental review, classifying them as seeker and for infilling purposes in already developed areas. It's a bloody nightmare. Read it. We still have a chance to send in comments.
Did you send in your comments?
No, I haven't. I haven't yet. I wanted to.
Who is they, Michael?
This is DEC. The governor has asked the DEC to change all the regs.
Right.
And just reading this stuff, I mean, they're making a lot of work for me.
But you could send in the letter. You could also ask the.
Well, maybe
I want everyone else to look at
maybe
that.
have a little more impact because it came from the Suffolk County CEQ as opposed to from Michael Cowper.
Right, or the legislature.
Gadfly he is.
Right,
Yes,
or
well,
the
that's
legislature.
Read between the lines. But at any rate, I want everybody to take a look, maybe before next meeting, come up with comments. This is a pretty decent analysis of everything. And we'll just sort of go from there. It's a nightmare, is what it boils down to. They are basically trying to really allow development to occur more easily. In some cases, actually, it's very, very intelligent what they want to do. I mean, I can't always say it's a nightmare. In already disturbed areas where there's infrastructure, for example, they're talking about allowing redevelopment of buildings as long as there aren't major impacts.
Did you make a list of positives?
This is non-denominational, okay, in that sense. Read it, you'll see where it goes. I raise the issues,
It's
that's
what
all I
I
do.
told you it is, Michael. It's the consultant's retirement plan.
I know that. Hey, I'm a winner on this one. I love all
Is
this.
that a difference from the lawyer's full employment plan?
Thank you.
For past
There you
seeker?
go.
Hey,
But wait, I have a thought now.
Uh-oh.
listen.
That's Deja.
The DEC wants to change their secret regulations.
Yeah.
We, as a county, because we are a lower level of government, can have a stricter regulation based on what their regulation is. We can still,
You really think that's going to happen?
can we change our secret?
What it boils down to is, yes, there is a one-way ratchet allowed.
Yeah.
However, given what's just happened, etc., these regulations dovetail quite nicely with the stuff that's coming up. Sandy, Hurricane Sandy.
This is all about, it's economic development.
It's economic
That's
development
all.
is really what, and making it easier
Faster
to do infilling.
to get it, yep.
Okay, so yes, can the county do that? It could be stricter. Will the county do that? You want a snap opinion? No.
Food for thought.
Okay.
That's all.
Nonetheless, this is because it was presented to the Planning Federation. Non-denominational, no viewpoint is taken. I simply raise issues. The other thing is
No, raised issues, but did you amend them on changes that are positive?
No, I didn't say negative or positive. Just read it, make your own conclusions. My job was to present what the changes were and to point out what was good, what was bad, what was interesting.
All right.
That's why I'm saying non-denominational. Second off, there's an article in here about ABCO. It was written by Richard Amper, shall we say, a little bit upset about what happened with the town of Brookhaven's efforts regarding Carmen's River. Read it, it's very interesting. The reason I bring it up is we've had some issues with some of the ABCO people. And we take a lot of shots for a lot of reasons from different groups. And, they always say we don't know seeker, and then we supposedly have biases, and people demand EISs come out certain ways and predetermined. This is sort of showing where a lot of this public comment is coming from. I don't mind public comment that is informed, but it drives me nuts when people just come out and don't know what they're talking about and try and drive a process. And Amper actually called it right for a different reason. But it's just something to see and consider.
Okay, any other concerns?
Two quick things. I told Mike about it, Michael Way about it at the beginning of the meeting. Apparently, Vanderbilt Museum, there was an article in the Long Islander concerning changes they want to make out there. And it was fairly extensive. Now, whether it's all a pipe dream or it's for real, I don't know. But we should be aware of it.
I'm going to try to dig that article.
And if you find it, would you send it to Rich and I?
Someday come share this board. The other thing is, I would like to make a resolution wishing everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah and a Happy New Year.
Okay,
Same to you.
Is there a motion to end the meeting?
Motion to end. And to deny Richard's
Seconded
motion.
by Jim. All in favor? Motion passed. But I want to wish everybody a wonderful holiday season. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. And just a little reminder, January is our election month, so just to put that in the back of your brain.